Hello everyone and welcome back to the Premiership Quarter. Today I'm going to be doing another video of my suspension reactions, going over incidents from the last 2 weeks, including the Jack Higgins incident, the Callum Brown incident, as well as the most recent one being the Will Powell suspension with saying the homophobic slur. I'm also going to be talking right at the end about something that I heard from today with Geelong and a new Scoreboard financial situation, which is very, very weird, and I don't understand that. So I'm going to talk about that in depth right at the end of the video. It seems at the moment that we essentially can't go 2 weeks without some genuine poor decision making from the AFL's MRO and tribunal system with no consistency whatsoever. It's something that I've done a few times on this channel. I think this is my 4th video in total. And honestly, if I can get a video out of it every 2 weeks, so be it. It's just better for me, and it's more content for you guys as well. That being said, we'll dive straight into it. So we'll start with the incident from last week, which is going to start with the Jack Higgins one because it's the most talked about one. He has gotten 3 weeks for a sling tackle on Ali that resulted in a concussion, and the Saints challenged it, and then at the tribunal it wasn't overturned and was given 3 weeks. It was relatively forceful contact with the ground. He certainly didn't help himself earlier, and trying to make sure he's safe as a player because of the way he disposed of the ball. He had it in one hand and the other was pinned with Jack Higgins, trying to get him to ground. And by trying to kick it, essentially, he made himself off balance, and that only allowed Higgins to be able to put more momentum into getting him into ground, which caused the head knock and the resulted concussion. It's not a great look for either player. I don't think Ali helps himself at all trying to get rid of the ball in such a way. However, with the rules and that are being umpired by the umpires, it's really not much to blame because I think that's what the AFL is sort of hoping for with the new rules. If you do have the ball in one hand and there's any chance of you potentially getting rid of it, you almost have to at this stage. And it looks like the umpires are umpiring to that rule. And that's probably why Ali tried to get rid of the ball in that fashion, because that was the only way he could have. Higgins definitely does dump him in the tackle, but whether that's worth 3 weeks it's probably not. I think a more realistic suspension would have been 2. I can hear an argument for 1, but I think if you do want to ban the action, it's possibly a 2-week suspension. So I understand him getting suspended. I'm not saying it's not a suspension at all, but I think 3 weeks is a bit too severe, and it seems the Saints have been punished a bit harshly so far this year. Then we also had the Riley West bump against Fremantle, I think on Walker, and he got 1 week for it. He absolutely opts to bump. I don't think you can argue with that at all, because as he's going towards the play, he's looking at Walker, and then as soon as he's about to make contact is when he thinks he can turn his head so it looks like he won't, and that's when he makes contact. There's not a lot of head-high contact. However, it's enough for a sighting, absolutely. And I think if you want to ban the action and not the result of what has happened, this is the correct call to give him 1 week. There is a bit of an exaggeration with Walker's head tilt, and that's certainly not a great look at the moment with the AFL. It's becoming a lot more prevalent in the game. However, I don't think that excuses the contact that West made to his head, and the AFL got this one right with the 1 week suspension. We'll then sort of skip ahead to this current week, as I'm recording this on the Thursday before the clash between Carlton and Melbourne. And I'm going to talk about the Liberatore hit, which I didn't mention at the start of the video. But he has been given a 1 week suspension for his tackle on Will Day. And I think this one's probably fair as well. He's not going to be playing, but he wasn't going to be playing anyway, against, I think they're playing Richmond this week. Because of his 2 concussions in the last 3 or 4 weeks. And so best wishes to him. Hope he can get fully fit and just be as healthy as he possibly can, because he has had a few concussions in his history. But to talk about the actual incident, I think it's pretty clear to see 2 motions. When he's tackling him, he pins his arm, and you can see him rotate him. He twists Will Day in the tackle, and then it looks like there's another excess twist and rotation that causes the impact and the momentum to get Day on the ground and actually cause some head contact with the ground. I think this is the correct call as well, similar to the Riley West one, where it's definitely an act that should deserve a 1 week suspension. I just think you could make an argument for 2 weeks because with this sort of action, there is two visible things, but the reason why they probably gave him one is because it's not the most clear. It's not the clear bang, bang. It's just sort of like a near two. So I think it's probably a correct call. Um, Outside of that, I don't think there was actually heaps too much head contact on with Will Day's head in the ground, but given it's the action, it's a correct call. We then had the Lockie Schultz punch on Blake Acres in the Carlton versus Collingwood match, and he has been given a 1 week suspension. And it's a pretty stupid decision from Lockie Schultz. There's no real explanation other than Acres just egging him on for him to punch him in the back of the head. And my question is, if you're not allowed to do it in boxing, a game when you not a game, a sport where you are punching someone else, how can you allow this in the AFL and only give him a 1 week suspension? It's a bit of a stupid decision, I think. I heard Andrew Gaze talking about it, and I absolutely agree with him. It's not something that you can simply give him a 1 week suspension. It should be 3 weeks minimum, and I think you could make an argument for 5. He probably has his hand closed. I think you can slightly make that out in the video, and that means it's a punch. It's not like where you're punching someone in the stomach with an open hand compared to a closed hand. You're hitting someone in the back of the head. That can cause serious head trauma, and that's something that the AFL has had to deal with as well this year because there's a court case going on. And when you're giving 1 week to a player who punches someone in the back of the head, what sort of game are you trying to make? What sort of game are you trying to show your fans? It's very stupid from the AFL, and I think they got this one wrong. We'll then also have the Maynard tackle that I'll talk about. This one got thrown out by the MRO, which is good because it was all given by Owies. Like, he was the one who threw his head back. He was the one who tried to show that it was head contact when there wasn't enough. The MRO stated that there wasn't enough excessive force in a sling, in a drive or rotate in the tackle to be able to cause that, and it's the correct call. But my question is, how is Owies not being given a staging fine for this? And I think you could make an argument that staging should be given a week suspension because at the moment it's becoming so much more prevalent in the game. It's something that I talked about before in this video. Players are learning to tilt their heads back and exaggerate any contact that might be made, and then as soon as they're given the ball, nothing's happened. They weren't ever hit. Owies was smiling afterwards. He knew he got away with it. It's something that they need to change because even younger players like Darcy Wilson, they're showing it in their games, and it's not something you want to see as a fan. It shows fake aggression, fake bravery, I think you could make an argument for as well. And it's not a good look, again, for the AFL. We'll then also have the final one, which is the Callum Brown 3-week suspension on his hit on Tom McCartan. And this one is probably a fair result because it's a really tough one. He is pretty close to getting the ball, but he does realize he's going to be second to it, and that's when he opts to bump instead of tackle. He braces his shoulder, and he makes head contact with McCartan. It's probably, I don't know if it's concussed him. I don't know if McCartan is missing the match or not. But he absolutely makes enough head contact to result in suspension. And I think 3 weeks is definitely enough. I think that's probably the minimum they need to go with now, because he initiates contact. He's second to the ball. He braces for contact, and then he makes high contact. There's nothing for, there's no argument you can make that should rescind this decision. He also knew it immediately. As soon as he goes to ground, he goes like this and saying, sorry. So he knows it as well. And I think it's absolutely the fair call because it is not a footy act and it's not something we can accept in our game. The last suspension that I'll talk about is the Will Powell and him saying a homophobic slur to a Brisbane player apparently in the first quarter in the Q clash. And it's pretty surprising that this happened within 4 weeks of the Jeremy Finlayson situation. And it's pretty disappointing as well as an AFL fan. It's not something you want to hear about or even think about in the AFL, and something that I think it absolutely needs to get removed from. I don't think we've had many situations like this over the last 5 years. Whether that's with it being reported or not, I'm not too sure. We obviously had the Taylor Walker and the racism comments, I think, in 2021. But to have two homophobic slurs being said within a 4 week period, it's not a great look, and it's probably something that does need to be done and needs to be talked about a little bit. Whether you agree with a suspension or not, it's there, and it's really, really poor from both Will Powell and Jeremy Finlayson. And I agree with them increasing it to 5 weeks, and I think that should now be the minimum. I still don't understand how Alistair Clarkson got away with it and only received a $20,000 fine. We should also increase fines for other players, but that's an entirely separate point. Finlayson got 3 weeks. It's now been increased to 5, and that should be the baseline from now on if something else happens like this again. It's unfair that Taylor Walker got 6 when something like this only got 3, and then now 5. But this is the baseline, and I don't think it can change. And then lastly, I want to talk about the federal government cutting funding by 75%. I think it's $36 million in total for cancer research, when we have one of the leading research facilities and research teams in the entire world, simply because Geelong Stadium need a new scoreboard worth about $4 million when they've just renewed their stadium and given themselves a whole new wing. What? That is one of the stupidest decisions I think I've ever seen in my life. I am genuinely bewildered at what has happened right now. My mother's an avid listener of 3AW, and she told me about this when she got home. And I listened to Jackie Felgate interview Mark Allen, who is a cancer survivor himself. I think he had bowel cancer. And I agree with everything he said. To quote him, he said, "I do not know how the Victorian governments sleep at night." And that's absolutely fair. I, I, I'm genuinely at a loss for words right now, because when you're cutting $36 million and you're giving $4 million to a team who have just renewed their stadium completely and given them an extra $4 million to do another scoreboard, like seriously, it is so stupid. And it's something, it's one of the weirdest decisions I've ever heard of in my life. But that's going to end this video. If you enjoyed it, please hit the like button. It'll really help this push this video in the YouTube algorithm. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and if you enjoy this type of content, leave your thoughts about the suspensions, about Geelong's funding in the comments below, and thanks for watching.